And welcome back to Retro Wrestling Games Presents. I'm your host, Alex G, and with me this evening is Matt Riley. How you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm Dandy.
On this episode, we will take a look at Hammerlock Wrestling for the Super Nintendo. Now, Hammerlock Wrestling was developed by Jellico, the makers of RBI Baseball, and it was released on the Super Nintendo in October 1994. Now, Hammerlock Wrestling is a port of Tenryu's Pro Wrestling Revolution in Japan. This is the Japanese version of this game used the official license, his wrestling promotion, Wrestle Romance or War, or being a favorite of tape traders from back in the day. You see early Chris Jericho there too, which is nice. So in this game, a player can choose from 12 fictional wrestlers that are all ripped off. So we have wrestlers that are quote-unquote inspired by Lex Luger, Hulk Hogan, Abdul the Butcher, Road Warrior Hawk, Yokozuna, and Stan Hansen. And of course, Tenryu. Because American audiences in 1994 have a close association and knowledge of Tenryu, although we did see him at WrestleMania 7. This game is weird, man. I gotta be honest. It's not good. It's not.
I gotta tell you, I did a little research, and I found out that this game is actually the reason you can't call it Super Nintendo anymore. They took it.
Okay.
They were like, the game's so bad, it hurt the brand. So there it is.
All right.
Okay, well, I will say one thing. When you watch this, if you have seizures, don't watch it.
So it's weird. Like, okay, graphically, it looks fine when you look at it originally, right? It looks fine. Like, okay. It looks like a typical, early 90s Japanese wrestling game. But then the screen is split into thirds. So
Right.
you're on top. The ring and both the wrestlers are in the middle, and the bottom is your opponent, and it kind of gives you this close-up view. So every time you do a move, the screen on top changes to mimic what you're doing. So if you're throwing a punch, you'll see like essentially an animated cutscene of your guy throwing a punch, or if you hit a maneuver, say a body slam, it goes into a cutscene of your wrestler doing a body slam, but it doesn't work well. It's very distracting. It makes it hard to play.
You remember Super Tecmo Bowl?
Yes, I do.
How when you score a touchdown, it would cut that like dun 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 dun, and then
Yeah.
the giant super jack dude catch the ball. It has that kind of feel to it, where it's like we're going to show you some really good close-ups. Also, in some ways, it almost reminds me of the precursor to the cutscene. Like we're going to have a cutscene, but during the match. Oh, I don't know if that's a good idea. No, it'll work. It'll work.
It doesn't work, and it's an action game, and it doesn't work because it's too fast. And you can't have it done simultaneously. Like, if you would have done a body slam and then would have cut to the cutscene of you throwing the body slam and then go back, it may have worked better, but even that's going to be annoying as shit.
Right.
The good news about this game is that there's 60 moves, as well as unique finishers for each wrestler, which is nice, You can really dig that. The reception for this game, GamePro described it as interesting but confusing. And I guess the division of the screens is what really hurts this game. It looks good, but you can't focus on the action, and it really limits the movement in the ring for the wrestlers. The controls are not great. When you have wrestling games in general, gameplay is key.
Yeah.
Like if you have bad gameplay, then it's not going to work well, and it doesn't. I mean, you have your strong grapple, you have your light grapple. You have additional grapple attacks when you hit the A or B button. Y to pick up, B to pin, and then different maneuvers would be a stomp by using the A, or you can do all your basic wrestling holds, and that's fine. But I think overall, just like it's not good. Again, it has kind of a Fire Pro feel in terms of the lockup animation, where you guys will join hands, and then their knees will bend back and forth, and during the animation, a small window of time would be initiated, and the first wrestler to essentially input their command fastest will win the lockup and then be able to perform the inputted attack. But even that doesn't necessarily work well, and trying to get the timing down on this is pretty difficult. So you want to do things, but you can't. That's the tough thing about bad wrestling games with poor controls, is like you want to do things, but you can't. And that's what makes it extremely, extremely frustrating. So the actual names of these guys have been changed. So obviously in the Japanese version, Tenryu is Tenryu, which is good. Yeah, we all love Tenryu. We got that. But you got Stan Hansen as Hone, Hone. You have Wakata, who is Jumbo Shiruda. Dorgan is Hulk Hogan. Eagle is Road Warrior Hawk. Again, that's not a stretch. Luger, Ludger is Lex Luger. Misha is Masawa. Fudo is Great Muda. Fudo, well, there's two Fudos. There's the Cajun Budo Fudo, and then there's the Great Muda Fudo. Is that Abdul the Butcher? Again, not a stretch. And Ozaki is Yokozuna. And then Takamoto is Hashimoto. There's that. Again, overall, this game is not good. And you know how I feel about Japan, right? In Japan, they say, fuck your copyright, because we were able to use Hulk Hogan and gave him a eerily similar name and not give a fuck and not get sued since the 90s. And no one's looking at Hammerlock Wrestling, unfortunately. So it's not good overall. Again, it's a game that you would purchase because you collect wrestling games like myself, or you have a morbid curiosity. Is it the worst game on the NES? No, in terms of wrestling. That goes to the FMW game. That's still probably the worst game on the Super Nintendo that I've played so far. But we'll get to them all, and we'll find out. But it's not fun. And when it comes to professional wrestling games, it has to be fun. If it's not fun, it's not going to be a good game. And this game is not fun. And that's the biggest issue with this game. So if you're a hardcore collector, obviously you're going to get it. If you're a casual fan, I don't recommend it. I mean, it's not pricey at all. It's about $15, complete in box on eBay. So, yeah, it's decently priced. You know, it is a Super Nintendo game, so, you can pick it. If you like Super Nintendo, then maybe you try it. But, again, I do not recommend this game at all. Go play Fire Pro. Don't play this. Play something else. It's not good. It's just the cutscenes is what hurt it. The split screen is what kills the game. And maybe if it didn't have that and it was straightforward, then it would probably be an average game, most likely. But it's so distracting that it just turns it into not a good game at all. So that's that. I do quickly want to talk about since this is a port of a Japanese game that made it over to the States, I want to talk about some of our favorites and most notable Japanese wrestlers who came over to the United States and made an impact. And if you're going to talk about Japanese wrestlers who came over to the States and made an impact, I guess you have to start with Antonio Inoki, right? I think most people are familiar with Antonio Inoki through his mixed martial arts fight with Muhammad Ali that was closed-circuited around the country. Every promotion in the United States carried it, and most of them had a card attached to it. One of the Shea Stadium shows for the WWF is attached to this Inoki Ali fight. Inoki spent most of his time in the WWF, but you would see him on the undercard on a lot of MSG shows. He was the WWF World Martial Arts Champion, for whatever that's worth, probably not a lot. But he's definitely familiar to United States audiences. So Matt, what are your thoughts on Inoki in general?
Well, like you were saying, I'm as an American wasn't as familiar outside of a few things per se, but I think probably my bad is do more research on the past when you see them now. Although I will say I did watch a bunch of the Destroyer matches last week, and he was good. I mean, it was fun to watch him.
He's real good. Everyone should go back though. The Destroyer just recently passed away, so I recommend anyone to go back and watch some Destroyer matches. He's some great matches. Dick Fire is fantastic.
The guy who trained me was Perry Saturn. And he was, at least locally, he was a very loud heel wrestler. And
like Mike Sharp loud?
Kind of really overselling the face moves, but also talk to them, yell at the ref. And Destroyer had that quality to him. Inoki, I was never a big fan, so,
he likes to shoot on guys, too. That's why Bruno never worked for New Japan, because he hated Inoki, because back in the day he fucking shot on Bruno.
Really?
And Bruno almost fucking killed him. So that's what Bruno says anyway. But But again, in terms of professional wrestling, the founder of New Japan Pro Wrestling, again, is very important in the history of professional wrestling in general. And he did have some ties to the United States. He made appearances over here. And then the other side of the coin, you have Giant Baba. Now, I think we've seen Baba mostly in those Crockett Cup shows, right?
Right.
He's always teaming with Tiger Mask, and we've seen them. We saw title defenses on St. Louis TV where he would get a title match against Harley Race every once in a while. So again, him being Giant Baba, you would, he's very recognizable. He's a giant Japanese man, so he's very, very recognizable, and someone that American fans would have would have definitely been into. Talking about Baba, you got to bring up Tiger Mask. Now, Tiger Mask, everyone knows the story about Tiger Mask. He's based on a comic book over Japan in an animated series, and he made his travels into the States. Mostly working WWF in the early '80s. There's some really good MSG shows that this is like a Dynamite Kid Tiger Mask match from MSG, and like the New York WWF audience doesn't know what to think about it because it's so fucking crazy. I've never seen anything like that before. So if you look in the crowd, you can see like people's like minds are being blown as they're watching this crazy match. But Sayama, the original Tiger Mask, is definitely someone that American fans will recognize. In addition to that, you have guys that they made their foreign tours or their foreign excursions over the United States, like Tatsumi Fujinami. You saw like Onita in Memphis quite a bit. But I think for me, the first Japanese wrestler that I got into was the Great Muta.
Yeah.
In WCW 1989, when they brought Muta in, he was so fucking different. And he had the mist, and he was the son or nephew, because it would change every once in a while, of the great Kabuki. We've seen Kabuki for years. And Muta was doing, a lot more martial arts. He was doing, backspring elbows. He was doing, obviously, the moonsault. And for 1989, like, no one was really doing those maneuvers. And he just brought a breath of fresh air to, some people may consider STL WCW, although I thought 89 was their best year prior to 1994. But he seemed like to be like the mirror image of Sting. And I always felt like that rivalry should have been used more because they always had really good matches with each other. And it's a shame what they did to Muta and that fucking Starrcade tournament. They fucking just dropped him out.
Yeah.
But he did win the TV championship, so. And he would always come back and forth. He came back as NWA champion. For a while, he was in the NWO for a minute for no reason. But he's definitely recognizable to just about every American wrestling fan who was watching wrestling at the time. Everyone knew who Great Muta was, and everyone thought he was amazing. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on Muto, Keiji Muto?
Oh, I was a big fan of Muta. I remember actually when he was the Super Black Ninja.
Oh, yeah?
In WCCW. He's another of those guys. Like, I was actually if I had to say my first Japanese wrestler that I was a fan of would probably be Kabuki, because I for every reason our random cable channel carried WCCW on the weekend sometimes. Muta I was a huge fan of. I think they really underutilized him. They should have done more with him.
WWF was interested in bringing him in, and I guess the story goes is that Gary Hart didn't want to send him to New York, which is probably a mistake. Also, WCW wanted to turn him babyface, which I believe Muta claims that Gary Hart kind of nixed his babyface run because he was getting cheered like a babyface. Everyone just loved Muta. He wasn't really like a heel. He would do some heelish shit, but he wasn't like a super heat heel. Everyone just appreciated his athleticism and his great matches.
Yeah.
He had one match. You seen that match with him and Hogan?
No.
Hogan's working like he's fucking Billy Robinson and shit. It's like, what the fuck? Hogan's actually fucking wrestling. It's amazing. So definitely go check out that Hogan Muta match. There's two of them, but they're both really, really good. It was like 1993. But yeah, Muta's definitely... he's probably before Nakamura, he was probably the biggest star and the biggest Japanese star in the States. I think that's fair. But then after Muta came Jushin Thunder Liger.
Yeah.
And Liger was doing amazing shit. Like, again, he's someone else that was, his character is based on an anime and the comic book series. And he's retiring this year. I got to meet him. He's awesome. He's so ridiculously good. And he's another guy that, when WCW had him, they would use him a little bit, but I don't think you get the full impact of Jushin Thunder Liger here in the States. Even though he was incredibly over and everyone remembers Liger because of the mask and the costume and the amazing matches he would have with Brian Pillman. And I'm hoping they do a Brian Pillman Jr. versus Liger match before Liger calls it quits. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on Liger?
Oh, I was a huge fan of Liger. He was fun. Going back into Godzilla territory, I was a fan of Jet Jaguar.
Yeah.
So when I saw that mask, I'm like, wait a minute. I enjoyed his work. I thought he was fantastic. It's crazy to think how old he is now, and he's still doing great things.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have him finally retire. Don't go out on a stretcher. Go out, walk out, Business is getting so much more dangerous nowadays. I think at some point they're going to have to scale back, and find that happy medium between, you know, the grounded style and the aerial, which isn't going to put everyone at risk. And a guy like Liger really kind of did a really good job of blending that without overly, you know, putting his life on the line.
A big time high flyer, and he would have all these amazing matches in Canada with Owen Hart. But eventually, you know, as he got older, he had to, you know, cut back on it. But he still was working, you know, having these tremendous matches, even though, you know, his aerial feats were limited due to years of injuries and stuff. And he had a brain tumor too, and he came back from that. And it said he wasn't ever gonna wrestle again, but he came back.
Wow.
So Liger's fucking awesome. Another guy that got a lot of mainstream attention when he came to the States was Ultimo Dragon. Ultimo Dragon, I remember coming out on fucking like Nitro with the fucking 10 belts because he just won the J Crown, and like he's with Sonny Ono, and I don't know, like Ultimo got over too, and he's another guy that, oh, we're gonna stick him on the first hour of Nitro. He's gonna probably be, you know, TV champion and cruiserweight champion, and we're not gonna do more with Ultimo. But he was fucking awesome. People loved Ultimo Dragon. Every time you play a WCW video game, you have to fight other people off because they wanted to be Ultimo. You know, he had the Dragon Sleeper, and it was an amazing finishing maneuver. And he's having all these great matches with Lenko and Eddie Guerrero. And it's like, holy shit, this guy's fucking awesome. And you know, we all loved him back in the day. And he was someone that took the Japanese style and mixed it with the lucha style because he made his bones in Mexico. So his style was a little different. And I thought it was funny that they always kind of try to portray him as the last student of Bruce Lee. Like, what was he, 3? Because Bruce Lee died, like, what, in 671, 72?
Yeah.
You know, you call him the last student of Bruce Lee, it's like 1996. He's like, I don't know if that matches up. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on Ultimo?
Well, he's another guy that really brought a lot of innovation. And I remember there's, of course, that infamous picture with him with all the belts. And I've seen people sort of recreate.
He's the only man. He's the only man that hold a NWA, WWF, and like WCW title at the same time. Because that was all J Crown. Like WWF forgot that Mexico had the light heavyweight belt or so, or the New Japan had the light heavyweight belt for some reason. They just forgot that they gave it to him.
Whoops.
So, yeah, no.
But, you know, again, if one of those people is going to be the person to hold that kind of title lineage, he's the guy to do it. And I think sometimes we don't realize how lucky we were to see certain guys work together. You know, I know like we've had death and accidents and injuries take some our, you know, matchups away. But, you know, I mean, I always think back to like the night Edge retired when it was so sudden, you know, and even like, you know, earlier tonight with Tommaso Ciampa being on the shelf, and when they were talking about his knee and his shoulder, his neck, you know, I mean, does he have one more run in him? You know, well, we'll see, but
You have to be careful.
Right, you know, and
it always seems like the smaller guys get hurt more too.
Right, and I think it's because physically there's, you know, they put more torque on their body than the bigger guys, you know, so they're at higher speed. If you're listening to this and you haven't watched the Tommaso Ciampa Johnny Gargano unsanctioned match, that's a pretty brutal match with a lot of really dangerous spots. And, you know, these things come back to haunt you.
They always talk about the bump card, right? You
Right.
only have so many bumps in your bump card, and that's it. You're finished.
Yep.
So you got to try to maximize those. So it kind of is what it is. But I think Ultimo Dragon, again, one of my favorites of all time. And I've even seen, go back and watch the Ultimo Dragon Dean Malenko match, because those matches are off the fucking charts. And you would just randomly get them on Nitro. Nitro's just so weird. They don't have like this super crazy cool undercard, and then like bullshit main events at the NWO. And it's like, It's like, what the fuck? That's how WCW was. On the female side of things, I think we got to talk about, in terms of popularity and recognizability in the United States, you got to talk about the Jumpin' Bomb Angels. Like, when the Jumpin' Bomb Angels came out, and they're doing shit that we've never seen before, and these are women doing all kinds of crazy shit, and they having these matches with the Glamour Girls, and fucking Judy Martin is power bombing people like she's fucking Sid Vicious and shit. It's like, what is this? They're doing moves that had the announcers fucking stumped. They're like, I don't know what that was, but that was fucking awesome. Even Jesse was like, this is fucking great. But again, they only had it for a short run. They won the women's tag team title for a little bit, and then they were gone. But it goes to show you like how innovative women's wrestling in Japan was in the 80s, because there's shit they were doing back then that they're still not doing today. And it was like when Medusa went over there and she brought that back, that style, and she's like throwing German suplexes and shit. Like, holy shit, what the fuck is this? That shit was amazing. And the Jumpin' Bomb Angels, definitely get an honorable mention. In terms of some more recent stars. I mean, you got Shinsuke Nakamura. He's probably the most recognizable Japanese wrestler in the United States at this point. I think that's fair, right?
Yeah.
To a mainstream audience. Anyway, I know a lot more Americans are watching New Japan than ever before, but I think Nakamura, because he's on that WWF TV, he probably takes it at this point. And I think when he does choose to go back to Japan, he's going to go back to a bigger star. Although he was one of the biggest stars they had over there when he left, but I think he's going to come back and be, get the hero's welcome. He's, he went over into the United States and he had, you can say what you will about his run, but in terms of Japanese wrestlers and their runs, he's probably had one of the best runs in the WWF that a Japanese wrestler's ever had, which is not saying necessarily a whole lot. You can go back and talk about Hakushi and his run, although Hakushi did have great matches. So I love Jinsei Sasaki. I wish he had more matches with Bret Hart, and I wish he had matches with Shawn Michaels, but he didn't. But what are you going to do there? But I think Nakamura right now, you look at him and it's like, oh, okay, he's a star, and he's so outlandishly different than what we think of a prototypical Japanese wrestler. Even though he can't speak the language very well, he still has a natural charisma about him.
Yeah.
So, Matt, what are your thoughts on Nakamura?
I enjoy his work. I think he just, they've often kind of misused him. He reminds me in the way of like Asuka, or Asuka rather, I guess, in that, came in, had a lot of fire to them, and just kind of fizzled. And I would have rather seen them do a little better job of it, with
Asuka too is like when it comes to both Asuka and Nakamura, I think after a certain period of time, we don't know what to do with them anymore.
Yeah.
And they gave Asuka this big undefeated streak, and that went away. To her credit, I mean, she's had kick-ass matches and hasn't really hurt anybody, unlike some of the other female performers on the roster. And the fact that we haven't seen that Ronda Rousey versus Asuka match in a big fight setting, I mean, I think they're just... It's once again the WWE just kind of just missing the boat on the obvious.
Yeah.
And that's an obvious matchup there. Where there's so much things you could do there, but there's no, we're just choosing not to do that because they could easily pull the trigger on a lot of these things. And even when it comes to Nakamura, it's like they just choose not to necessarily pull the trigger on these things, and it's like even winning the belt doesn't mean a whole lot. It doesn't prepare you to the next level like it would, 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yep.
Like if you became WWF champion in 1989, you were literally the top guy in the industry. If you win the WWE championship now, they could still put you on a pre-show.
Right.
It don't mean nothing. It doesn't mean anything, and it's due to years and years. And I necessarily do I blame the Attitude Era on this a little bit? I do. Hot-shotting the belts and switching the belts very often, and now having two belts yet again after they unified the belts prior to this. It's like who's the top? Is it Brock Lesnar? Brock Lesnar technically the top guy, but he's not the WWF champion. He's the Universal champion, but he's the top guy. But we don't see him on TV very often. But it's weird. There's no consensus number one top guy anymore. Back in the day, there was Hogan at number one, and then you had a bunch of twos underneath them. You had Savage, you had Rude, you had Jake the Snake Roberts, you had all those guys at number two, but Hogan was clearly the number one.
Right.
And they replaced him for a little bit with Savage because Hogan was gone, and when Savage was in that spot, he was number one. And it was 1 and 1A, and then Savage gets demoted back down to 2 after losing the belt. And then they try again with Warrior, and they try to boost Warrior to that one spot, but you could never really overtake Hogan anyway.
Yeah.
And I guess realistically, since The Rock, maybe there hasn't been a consensus number one guy. Maybe, I mean, you can say Cena, I guess, if you really want to, but even his whole run is mired in muck. It's a mucky. His career post ECW one night stand, it's mucky. It's you still weren't main eventing every fucking show for fucking extended period of time. You main event a show here and then a main event show there, and you're going to be in a big angle, but that's neither here or there. And where you have guys who are potential, there's so many guys that could potentially be number one. It's almost like they have too many or hurt everybody else by elevating somebody.
I think their problem is again that they're almost so afraid of elevating one person that, like, let Daniel Bryan run this thing and go. And, with each brand, you could do different things. You could have one brand have Brock Lesnar to me has really crippled that brand because he's a MIA champion. And I don't care. His matches are never that good. They're not. I mean, like, even when he has good matches, it's because of someone like Finn Balor or Daniel Bryan.
AJ Styles.
Right. Like
he has good matches with the smaller guys.
Right.
I don't think he can have that type of match with like a Jinder Mahal.
Right. Like he has this.
Poor Jinder Mahal, by the way, back jobbing on main events now, like the main event TV show.
Yeah, hey, he just run. They got their business in India.
But they didn't, though. Roman Reigns is still the number one top selling star over there. It made no sense. It made no fucking sense to do that.
Yeah, that was dumb.
Jinder should have been a babyface anyway, but that's neither here nor there. But when it comes to Japanese stars, then I think, when they had like Nakamura win the Rumble and all that kind of good stuff, and Asuka, win, and I almost feel like it was like, look, we're treating Japanese stars good. Please come over from New Japan. But then the well ran dry over there. Like, we're not, no one else is coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Vince, you only have room for like 3 Japanese wrestlers on your roster. Like, if you get too many, you're gonna freak out or something. You don't know what to do. Yeah, you put them all in the stable, and they're like Kai and Tai, fucking 2019. But yeah, man. I mean, the question begs to be asked is. There hasn't been a Japanese star in the United States that has been the consistent #1 star in the industry in the United States. And I'm wondering if one day that will happen. It's got to happen at some point, right? Because they're just too good over there. I mean, once you have a Japanese star that can speak fluent English and can cut a killer promo, you would have no choice, right?
Right. Yeah, totally. I think that's the biggest thing is a language barrier. And if not the language barrier, having someone in a mouthpiece that can, translate that message.
But watch. One day you're gonna get that Japanese star that can speak perfect English and cut a hell of a promo in English, and they're basically gonna be forced in the position to make sure this guy's gonna be on top, because not only are they having great matches, they can have the promo to follow it up. And Nakamura is the closest one because he has a different type of charisma about him, where he doesn't really need to talk all that much, but he's still charismatic as fuck, especially like in ring. He's like, holy shit. And him with the theme music and the way he's dressed and his attitude, conveyed that on the screen, where he doesn't necessarily need to talk. I think actually him talking too much would actually fucking hurt him. Asuka's a pretty good promo for having a language barrier too. She is a pretty good promo. She's hilarious, by the way. Follow her on Twitter because she's funny. All right, guys. So before we wrap this up, I just want to mention that I will be at WrestleCon representing Retro Wrestling Rewind. I'll be at booth number 45. I'm sitting across from Ric Flair, Mick Foley, Kevin Nash, Tori Wilson, and Trish Stratus. Not Tori Wilson, just Trish Stratus. Tori Wilson got pulled from that show because she's going to the Hall of Fame. So,
yes.
But I think it's actually going to be Trish Stratus and Lita across from us. So it'll be right next to Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So come down and visit. We're going to have a raffle with some retro wrestling merchandise that my sisters will be putting in the basket for us. So come down and say hello. We'll be down there from all day on Friday and all day on Saturday. So, come please check us out. So guys, in terms of this game's a hard pass unless you're a crazy wrestling video game collector. I don't suggest playing it. Watch the video 1,000 times. Make sure you leave a comment, hit the thumbs up button, all that kind of good stuff. But don't play it. You can watch me talk about it, but don't. You can watch me play it. I did the dirty work for you on this one, folks. So you just keep that in mind. All right, guys. So we are officially out of time. So for Matt Riley, I'm Alex G. Have a good night.
Game over, man. It's game over. What the fuck are we gonna